Hey campers, it's Emily Breedlove, and I am back today with a live interview with a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Cortina. She lives here in Asheville with me, and she is the founder of the Ade Project. She is a girl boss in her own right, and what she does is a beautiful thing of marrying her artistry and her community development work as well as her entrepreneurship into this fabulous program. So Cortina, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking about your girl boss journey.
Yes, thank you so much for this space, for the invitation, and for everything that y'all are doing because we need this right now more than ever. So thank you.
It's a fun program. It's definitely fun to be having this summer.
Yeah.
So campers, you know the deal. We are streaming live. If you've got questions, post them in the forum. I'll be watching them throughout this, so I'll be sure to ask Cortina. Cortina, we're going to get started with just getting to know you as a leader as well as your organization. So first, who are you, Cortina? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I like being identified as a girl boss. I actually started my journey as a girl boss probably around the age that some of you listening to this right now are. So at the age of 12, I started working my first job, which was getting hired by my grandmother to work with her catering business. And not only was she one of the only women bosses or entrepreneurs that I knew, but she was definitely the only Black woman that I knew, especially in the rural South, that was brave enough to have a business. And she took me under her wing at that time, and I wasn't treated any differently than the adults. I had the same level of expectations and responsibilities. And even though now today I have my master's degree in management and leadership, and I've had all these professional experiences, nothing can truly touch the teachings that I had from my grandmother at the age of 12, and just really learning what it meant to be business minded and community minded, and that the two, like, you didn't have to choose one, but that it was important to do both. So super grateful for that. And also just to reflect that to y'all of like 12 years old is a great time to be starting your entrepreneurship journey. So I support it fully.
Awesome. Well, and so that's one of the things that we really look at in camp is, we're helping these girls really build their empire, right? Whatever that is, whether it's a business or a platform, a nonprofit, a cause. And so we look at what we call the 3 levels of opportunity, and that's being an entrepreneur, being a thought leader, and being an influencer. Mm-hmm. And that's they can kind of touch into different elements of how you make a difference in your community and around the world, as well as how you build a business to create financial opportunity for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you do really well in the work that you do with the Ade Project. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is the Ade Project? Can you tell us more about what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So the Ade Project, so actually Ade stands for Artist Designing Evolution. And it is a community-based learning organization, and it's comprised of artists and organizers and students, educators, entrepreneurs, and community leaders who are cooperating together to create a world beyond oppression, beyond inequity, and building capacity and opportunity and community within the BIPOC community. So the Black, Indigenous, POC community, through preserving our culture with creative, sustainable solutions. So that's kind of where the artist and the designing comes into play, is that, there's this notion that we all are inherently creative, and we all have this creative capacity. And one of the things that oppression has taken from us, not just people of color, but all of us, is our ability to innovate and create and think for ourselves. And this is such an interesting time that we're in, because we're really seeing this kind of battle, if you will, with people's human inherent rights and natural rights with what has been created on our behalf without our consent, sometimes even. And so it's a really interesting time for us to be doing the work that we're doing. But, the project part of our organization name comes into play because we believe that we're creating this kind of new world, one project at a time. And so we come together on projects. We, work with community around projects. And so we're often showing up as contractors, as designers, as consultants, and things like that. And again, keeping in mind that we're not all artists in the way that we might think about it, but sometimes it's literally about having a creative perspective for a community challenge or issue and being able to look at it in a different way.
Well, and so that's one thing that, art is it's a great way to talk about hard things, right? Using art, using story, you're able to take these really challenging things that are hard usually to talk about and present it in a way and share it with the world that gets people thinking about it
Yeah.
in a way that they may not have before.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've got some questions from some of the campers.
Okay, go for it.
So, what caused you to make this project?
So one of the things about Ade Project is really wanting to create from a place of my lived experience. What I know as a Black, queer Southern person, is that, again, like I said before, a lot of times there are decisions that have been made on my behalf, and that generationally have been made on behalf of my community. And so kind of working against that takes a lot of effort. But what happens is that we're able to build resilience, and that we are, if we so choose, that we can see what we've been through as strengths, as stepping stones, that we've really kind of broken through to define for ourselves what success is. And so, and being in this community in Asheville specifically, but like Western North Carolina being home for me, like I feel really committed to wanting to see better for my community. And as an artist and as an organizer, I can't help but kind of see how things are so inherently connected, and that there are just conversations and connections that aren't happening. And as you said, art and music and our creative selves is our shared language as a human race. And so if we can focus on that, and we can really see that art and culture can help us learn about history, preserve history, to forge new connections, to gather people together, it's really powerful what we can accomplish. And there's so many mediums when we think about, art and culture, right? So it really creates this way of building community that's really powerful. And the last thing I'll say is, before I did this work, and where Emily and I first met was when I was in the tourism industry. And I had a business at that time called Visit and Venture, and we did tourism product development work. And it was during that time that I realized that the arts and culture is the top driver of tourism, and tourism is the top driver of many economies in Western North Carolina. And so why isn't there more of a focus and support on supporting the art and the culture of community? Because that's our thread, that's our cultural fabric. So it's not something that we should ignore at all. And also, like, there are different ways to engage with it that can break down other social barriers. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Well, and I love that, because this is really pulling together so many different elements of who you are, right? And that you're able to kind of piece it into this really unique project.
Mhm.
So just out of curiosity, is yours is it a business? Is it a nonprofit? That's one thing that we look at in the camp, is the two different
Yeah.
worlds.
So, and I'm definitely always glad that people ask questions about structure. So, one thing I'll try to say this super quickly, but so some of the other work that we've done and that we've been aware of in our history, Emily, is the work of B Corp and what it means to be a business that is in business for the good of the community, that is in business not just for the bottom line, but you're thinking about, what is my social impact on our community, on the rest of the planet. And so with that in mind, whenever, the time came of like me giving birth to Ade Project, I was like, this is definitely a community rooted organization. And I don't fully believe that being a 501c nonprofit is going to be the structure that can help make this really what it is, which is it's about decentralizing power. It's about being cooperative. It's about sharing resources and exchanging with the community. And so a 501c3 nonprofit with the mission and vision in mind just doesn't work, because you have to have some linear structures in place. So at that moment, I was like, okay, well, it absolutely needs to be a cooperative. If North Carolina had a legal structure that we could be a B Corp, a benefit corporation, not necessarily a B Corp, but that legal status, that's what we would be. But because of how law is structured in North Carolina, we are legally structured as an LLC. We have a fiscal sponsor, which allows us to have their 501c3 nonprofit benefits, to be able to apply for grants and to get resources from foundations and other charitable donations. But with the LLC as our structure, that gives us the autonomy to like really take ownership of our profits and of our process. And just make sure that once we're ready to grow other cooperative members or owners of Ade Project, because that's the long-term vision, is this actually is going to be a full-fledged cooperative where there's shared ownership and shared resources, that we can, being an LLC allows us to add other member owners as LLCs. So that's kind of the route and the path that we're on, and it works really well.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to translate that into Camp Girl Boss language because we've
Cool.
talked a little bit about this.
Cool.
So you are a mission-driven business, that you are a business that gives back to your community, but you work in partnership with a nonprofit, right? So,
well, and we're fiscally sponsored, and they're
right.
partners, but I think fiscally sponsored is important language to know and to introduce too, because that means that they are taking fiscal responsibility. They're in partnership with us on our fiscal responsibility, and we're able to show and prove how we're doing our community work without having to take on the 501c3 status ourselves.
So that means that the nonprofit is giving you guys access to grant funds, which as a business is really hard. As a for-profit business, it's hard to get grants. Yes. But you also talked about being a cooperative. And so that's one thing that we've looked at in that, because that's one thing that a nonprofit typically does is it has a team of leaders. And so by being a cooperative, you're bringing that same element into your business. And so it means that you have a leadership team, and that you guys make decisions together as a team, which is also really great, especially for a mission-driven business. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say is that being a cooperative also means that the work is community rooted and based, is that we're not making decisions at necessarily institutional level, that literally the people that are in decision-making positions are the community members that are impacted by the issues and the challenges that we're trying to overcome. So it's very much that it's led by and rooted in community, and that's really the nature of a cooperative in the first place.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, so we've got one more question. So, okay. So the question is, what is your creative magic? And I know that you have worked with Camp Girl Boss for a couple of years. So we asked you the same question last year. Yeah. It's such a big part of the Girl Boss experience. And it really is looking at that fire, that spark inside of you, that deeper purpose that really motivates all the work that you do. So how would you describe your creative magic?
Yes, I would say, excuse me, at this point in my life, I would say that my creative magic is facilitation. I would say that there's so much more that I've come to understand and know about facilitation, and that really most processes in our lives, and probably in the function of the planet, is facilitation, because it's really about guiding a process. And so for me, that shows up in being a racial equity facilitator, or facilitating with my clients when I'm doing business coaching or creative coaching. Like, that's a facilitation process. I see birth and processes in nature as facilitation. So I think it's definitely the creative magic that I definitely feel most proud of, and that I just see reflected back from all the rest of the world. It's just there.
For the girls that don't know the term facilitation, how would you define that or describe it in your own words?
Yeah, so I think facilitation, the first level of understanding is the difference of seeing somebody as a trainer versus a facilitator. So you might see a trainer standing kind of at the front of the room, leading a workshop, and kind of like talking in there, the expert. Whereas a facilitator in that same space might actually be sitting out in the circle with the participants, and actually be inviting the participants to share their own kind of collective wisdom, as opposed to just being the only one talking. So that's kind of the best way I can describe.
Yeah, more of like a guide to the conversation and kind of pulling the ideas of everybody in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, so Cortina, those who do want to learn more about what you're doing, where would they find that information?
Yeah, I think the website is the best place. That stays really up to date, because that's also one of my art mediums is I love doing web design. So I do try to keep our website up to date. You can check out case studies of programs and projects we've done over the past years and see our impact and our story. Also, there's a link to our podcast, which I recently launched this spring. And so feel free to check those out. And then there's also some information there about how we're responding to COVID-19. So there's some cool things to check out. And as always, just feel free to use that contact form or the email address to get in touch with me directly for any other questions.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to link to the site in the forum so girls can find your information.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, Cortina, for joining us today and for telling us all about your project and sharing your wisdom with our girls.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Emily.
All right.
Y'all have a
See
great
you, girls. We'll see you tomorrow.